Well, we're back, getting ready to get to week 2, and we had some interesting scenarios take place here in week 1. We saw a couple upsets, we saw some big wins, we saw some unexpected things happen as well, but overall, it was great to be back into a football atmosphere and environment over the weekend. Obviously, we were able to get 4 of the 5 games covered, which was great considering the different times that everything was being played at and the locales of where those games were at as well. But we made it happen. It was a lot of fun. Obviously, we are turning into week 2, and we got some big matchups again here this week as well, featured by our game of the week, which is going to be Orangeville versus Lena Winslow. But we have some other highlighted games with Du-Pec and Stockton playing. Obviously, we have some other teams, too, that are getting to the field for the first time in West Carroll, Dakota, Forreston, Amboy, and then we have Rockford Christian joining the NUIC for the season, replacing AFC's schedule as well because Rockford Christian was an independent team. Their conference folded at the end of the football season of 2019. They didn't have a schedule, so it was good to see Coach Frederick and the Royal Lions fill in that void as well.
Definitely. It was really nice that we were able to have somebody just ready to step in and, take or come into, play for AFC, which was kind of unfortunate for them and everything that happened there with not having the numbers. And I believe that was really the only issue, wasn't it?
It was. Obviously, AFC, talking to Coach Kutz, they're going to play an 8-man schedule. They were able to get at least a JV game in with Alden Hebron ahead of the Hiawatha River Ridge game over the weekend. So they're doing the right thing with the low numbers that they have. They were afraid that, injuries were going to make them not available to play an 11-man schedule. So you got to do what's best.
Exactly. And in a season where nothing really matters, right, it's nice to have that break.
Yeah.
I do look forward to seeing them come back in the fall.
It gets them a head start into getting that 8-man preparation down as well. So not a bad thing at all. Obviously, like we said, Rockford Christian comes back. Coach Brett Frederick is the head coach there, has been for the past 7 seasons, where he's led the Royal Lions to the playoffs for each of the last 3 seasons. He previously was in the NUIC at the beginning of the 2000s when he was the head coach for the Pectonica Indians, where he led them to 4 playoff appearances in 01, 02, 03, and 05, and collected Pectonica's only playoff win in 2005 when they beat Galena High School. So obviously he's been around for quite a while. He's had 19 seasons as a head coach, 8 seasons as an assistant between being at Pectonica, Freeport for a year, and now Rockford Christian. So they got a lot of good players here looking at them, and we'll go into that when we break down their game matchup. But, some good players to watch out for are Isaiah Johnson at wide receiver and defensive back. He was honorable mention All-State last season. And Caden Norquist is back as all-conference quarterback. And then you have Noah Ross and Zach Joyner returning as all-conference members as well. So it'll be interesting to see what Rockford Christian can bring to the table and how they're going to be able to compete with the stronghold of the NUIC. So we're going to break down these games right now.
All right, well, that was a really exciting first week back. Like you always often talk about parity, and there was no shortness of parity this week. But our first matchup is going to take us to Hazel Green to see the West Carroll Thunder take on the Galena Pirates. And that game will be played at Southwestern High School on Saturday at 10 a.m.
Yeah, this should be an interesting matchup. Obviously, we saw Galena come away with a win that we did not project them to have in our preseason previews. But they did an excellent job. I mean, you take a look, you knew that they would be competitive, especially when we talked about the return of Sam Hesselbacher,
Peyton Bauer.
Peyton
I
Bauer,
mean, there was a whole
Ethan Hafel.
list, yeah.
Yeah, and Brody Schemahorn, and then of course Gabe Garcia, and those guys really stood out big time in their game against EPC for that 28-6 win. Obviously, we have yet to see West Carroll take the field yet, but with new coach Teo Clark coming in, it'll be interesting to see what the Thunder can do, especially having what potentially could have been an extra week of practice to see what they have coming up. We don't know much about the Thunder yet outside of what we've discussed in the preview. So this is going to be that matchup to give us a little bit of information on what West Carroll is this season.
Now, I know that you had noted that Coach Freed had made a comment that he thought that this could be his best team since 2015. What do you think West Carroll, after having attended the EPC Galena game, sorry, I just blanked out there.
That's okay.
What is West Carroll? What are they going to have to? What factors are they going to have to look for?
Well, one of the really impressive things that Galena did against EPC, which I think leads to the comment that Coach Freed made, was the fact that Galena is very fast. I remember Coach Doyle asking me in pregame warm-ups, so what's Galena look like? I said, they're big and they're fast. And you could just see that warming up.
I feel like that is such a synonymous thing with Galena. They're big and they're fast.
Yeah, I know.
It's been that way for since you were in school.
Right. And but what they're able to do is they can run many different offenses. I mean, with what they have at their skill set, they can line up in a double wing. They can line up in the power I. They can line up in 5 wide. They can line up in a pro set where you got 4 wide and a single back. And they're effective in every formation that they line up in. And they're strong. They're powerful. I think one of the keys to success, obviously, is to stop the trap game up front. I mean, that's been a large staple in a Galena offense for many years, is getting the fullback the ball in a trap-type offense. And when they go into that double wing, it really allows that trap to really take hold because they put a back in motion. You think the ball's going one way and they're countering the other. So that's one of the areas where West Carroll's really going to have to stay home and hit the gaps. And they're really going to have to play a gap-style defense.
So, and I know even you had made the comment that you were impressed with Galena's play. What does Galena have to do to be 2-0 by the end of this week?
I think what they need to do primarily is clean it up a little bit. I mean, you take a look at Galena in the first half. They had 2 fumbles in EPC territory close. Well, they were both in the red zone. So, you're on scoring drives and you turn it over and you kept EPC basically in the game at that moment. And you saw them turn around in the second half, and every drive in the second half, with the exception of the last drive where they ran out the clock, they were able to score and take care of business. As long as they can continue to build on that, clean up that area, and as long as their offensive line and defensive lines play the way that they did, where they just attack, they'll be all right. I mean, we take a look at what Galena was in our preseason predictions, and we had them at 2-4. And some of that was going off of what we've seen over the last couple of years. I mean, obviously since the 2015 season, they haven't been that good. We thought that at 2-4 that we could potentially see them even at 3-3 or 4-2. And to be quite honest, if they continue to play the way that they did against EPC, 4-2 to 6-0 is not out of the realm of possibility, which would further answer that question. Are the Pirates back? I think that they can be. They still have a lot of room to make that happen, but they're definitely very formidable, and that was a big takeaway from that game with the Wildcats on Saturday night.
What are you taking?
Well, I have to say I'm going to take Galena in this one. I originally had Galena picked in this game originally, but especially after watching them on Friday night, I'm sticking with the Pirates here.
I am going to flip-flop my vote. I know I originally had West Carroll, but I was not able to listen to the game or attend. But from everything that you said, it sounds like they are definitely a force to be reckoned with this year.
Yeah, it's great to see the Pirates back.
Well, our next game takes us to Stockton, and I know this is one of your favorite places to attend. It's John O'Boyle Field. So, 7 o'clock this Friday, we will see Du-Pec face the Stockton Blackhawks.
Yeah, I mean, you take a look last week, obviously both these teams lost in their season debuts with Du-Pec going down 28-21 in a hard-fought physical game with Aquin. And, of course, Stockton seemed like they had a slugfest there in Milledgeville, losing the Missiles 14-8 in what seemed like a big defensive struggle marred with turnovers as well. So, you know, you take a look at how both teams played. Both teams committed turnovers expected in week one. You've had 16 months off. You come into the season. You got the pregame jitters. You're playing matchups that you have a lot of expectations and things get in the way. And that happened to both these teams. They both have that opportunity to square off, like you said, at John O'Boyle Field and see what happens here.
So my question is going to cover both teams. You listened to the Stockton Milledgeville game, and you were there for the Aquin Du-Pec game.
Yep.
Both, like you said, both teams lost in defensive battles. What can each team do? What can they take away from their loss to be successful in week 2?
Well, I think for the Rivermen, one of our big question marks was their line play coming into the season. We knew they had the skill guys. It was really what is their offensive and defensive lines going to do. And when you take a look at their defensive line, they really shut down Aquin in a lot of facets in that game. They really came ready to go. The offensive line is the area of concern still for the Rivermen, and what they need to do in order to help negate some of the issues that they had is they have to get pass protection. I mean, they were not very good with the pass rush of the Bulldogs, which forced quarterback Hunter Hoffman to scramble much sooner than what he should, putting him on the run out of the pocket, getting his eyes downfield, which he does a great job of, but he's really got to be able to get his feet set to make a good throw. And when they were putting him on the run, I mean, there was a couple plays where some of those throws got away from him. There was also a couple plays where he faced that rush, was able to get that pass off, and then took a big hit after it, too. So, I mean, you look at the growth of Hunter Hoffman, and he did an exceptional job in the game. But, yeah, if the offensive line can give him at least another second to make better decision-making processes, that'll help clean up a lot of things that the Rivermen had. The other issue is they need that offensive line there, too, because without them, they can't really put together a formidable run game. And against Aquin, I mean, the Bulldogs basically took away any chance of the Rivermen running the ball. And as you know, when it comes to big-time games, you have to be able to run that ball to chew up clock at the same time that you want to be able to score. And the Rivermen did not do that very well. As far as Stockton, obviously, areas that they need to clean up would be taking care of the ball. Obviously, we found out that Caleb Mimosa is the quarterback of the Blackhawks, and with that, they tried to run some spread. They tried to run their double wing offenses, and it seemed like one of their issues was line play. And then, of course, unfortunately, they had some turnovers on interceptions as well. So, again, they got to strengthen up that line play, which seems to be a common issue with a lot of the teams that we're seeing early on in the season. Obviously, we're only week 1, but we covered it in our preseason previews. And that's where the Blackhawks need to be as well. They got to get that line going so they can get the run game going. That's where the Blackhawks are effective. When you take a look at that game and you listen to it, you heard Herman with the carry. You heard Hilly with the carry, but there weren't a whole lot of yards there. So obviously, it wasn't the game that anybody thought Stockton would have, especially with the preseason expectations. Obviously, Herman being the leading rusher in the conference coming back, you thought that they would be able to get more things going. So they're gonna have a good hard time. Struggling with Milledgeville, which we thought Milledgeville would be more competitive this year, being another year older and whatnot, and the Missiles proved that. Du-Pec's defensive line is going to give Stockton some fits as well, so they got to come ready to go. But I still think this could be a very good matchup.
What do you think?
My original pick was to have Du-Pec in this game. I'm going to stick with the Rivermen getting their first win of the season. I like where they're at. Unfortunately, with that pick, Stockton would fall to 0-2, which is not where I expect them to be. But I'm sticking with the Rivermen.
I also have the Rivermen. We've got another Friday night 7 o'clock matchup, and this one is going to take us to McChesney Park, Harlem High School, and it will feature the East Dubuque Warriors taking on the Dakota Indians.
Yeah, you take a look last week, East Dubuque lost a tight one to Orangeville 18-14, and that was something that we brought up in our season previews. We also made note of it in the Week 1 preview as well, that these two teams have had tight games over the last several years, and again, it came down to a very good ball game that Orangeville was able to squeak out. Obviously, Dakota did not play last week, but they did have a scrimmage with Rockford Christian, which gave them a little extra practice. So we'll see how the Indians come into this game prepared to take on the Warriors, who have a game under their belt already.
Well, let's just segue right from that. What can Dakota do to be prepared for week 2, their Week 1?
Well, Dakota's going to have a lot of inexperience, especially on the offensive and defensive lines. And as stated before, East Dubuque brings back a boatload of talent with a lot of speed and skill. Dakota's going to have to be able to play some good pass defense in order to keep up with East Dubuque. But at the same time, that line play could be an issue for the Indians as well. I think Dakota's gotten faster over the course of the last time we've seen them play till now, which is a good sign. Because they're going to need a lot of that team speed to come to fruition for them to have success with the Warriors and keep up with what they have in team speed. As far as what they can do, they got to be able to play sound defensively, and with that, they're going to have to be able to check off on some guys like Declan Schemmel, and they're going to have to keep Sam Huntington at bay in the run game. East Dubuque was able to do some good things with those guys, along with Ben Montag and Sam Bowman in their offense. So against the Broncos. So as long as they can get their base 4-4 defense, and we see Coach Free change it up every now and then. Once in a while, he'll switch into a 3-5, and maybe that's more of what he goes back to, considering that he doesn't have a lot of size on the line this year, at least from what we can tell with what he has returning. He's got more speed than he does size, so maybe he goes back to that 3-5 defense that we saw a few years ago. And he's, like you said, he's going to have to be ready to play pass defense. So
you kind of brought up how Dakota needs to, speed is a concern for them to keep up with the Warriors, and obviously we've talked about this multiple times in the past. East Dubuque was never short of athletes. East Dubuque played a great game against Orangeville, even though they unfortunately walked away with that with the L on that. What can East Dubuque do to clean up that game and bring their A game to get a win against Dakota?
Well, I just think it's continue to play fundamentally sound on the offensive line. And execute, really. As long as you're doing your plays and you're executing them to the level that you need to, you're going to be able to move the ball. And, you know, having the experience that East Dubuque has, along with the athletic ability that they have, granted, they're more of a junior-dominated team. They're getting a great load of experience here, and I think as long as they continue to build on that, they're going to see some success, more success than what we gave them credit for, and we said that we could see them being much better than what we had predicted. And obviously the game with Orangeville kind of proved that they're ready to go and they can play with some of these top teams. One of the things that they have to do is get past the Dakota team that they haven't beat since the 2000 season when they last made it to the semifinals. So it's been a long time since we've seen the Warriors beat the Indians. For them to have that success, though, you know, you just gotta play sound defensively. Know that Dakota is going to change up. They're going to run it. They're going to throw it. So I think it's really going to come down to you got to take a look and see what Dakota's coming out with in their base offense. I think that you're going to see Dakota try to spread it out more than what we've seen in the past years, where they've basically been a wing T, double wing type team. I think that because of the lack of size, they want to try to run more of a pistol spread type offense to get their playmakers in open space rather than trying to run through you. And that'll be a different scenario than what East Dubuque's seen. However, their coaches have experience against those types of offenses, so it shouldn't be a radical adjustment for the Warrior defense to be able to make. It's just going to come down to, again, seeing what they can do and covering your gaps, doing your responsibilities, and executing them. And the team that's going to do it the best is going to win.
What are you taking?
Originally, I had Dakota picked in this game, but based off of last week, I'm flipping my pick. I'm going with the Warriors in this one.
Maybe I should I would have sounded smart when I said all that. That's what I was thinking. But I 100% have to agree with you. I know I had Dakota winning this matchup, but after listening to the East Dubuque Orangeville game, I was thoroughly impressed with what the Warriors brought to the table, and I feel like I would be foolish to, you know, go against that. Well, our next matchup is going to take us to the home of several games this weekend. Pretzel Stadium, Freeport High School. We're going to first one we're talking about is Rockford Christian at Aquin, and that'll be played at 3 p.m. on Saturday.
Yeah, so obviously Rockford Christian did not play last week, as we just got done mentioning in our previous slide that they had a scrimmage with Dakota. So this will be their first game action of the year. Whereas you have Aquin, ranked number 3 in Class 1A, who beat a very formidable Du-Pec team, 28-21 last week over at Wyeth Stadium at Rockford Auburn High School. And you know, this is going to be an interesting matchup. Obviously, like we mentioned in the preview to the episode, Rockford Christian is taking over AFC's schedule due to limitations with players for the Raiders. So Rockford Christian was more than willing to jump in and take that. And here they are. They're playing one of the top teams in the NUIC that started off.
Boy, oh boy, way to get your feet wet, huh?
Yeah.
So this is going to be the first meeting between the two schools. The Royal Lions have made the playoffs the last 3 seasons, as you said earlier.
Yep.
Tell me a little bit about, tell me a little bit more about what the Royal Lions have to offer.
Yeah, so I mean, we don't have a whole lot of knowledge on Rockford Christian as far as what they do offensively or defensively, but by the stats, it looks like they're more of a spread type, offensive type team. Based on their defense, they're going to run either a 4-4 or 4-3. And, they got some good players coming back. Isaiah Johnson was a wide receiver, defensive back, first team all-conference receiver each of the last 2 seasons, and he was honorable mention All-State last year. Last season, he hauled in 44 catches for 1,013 yards and 11 touchdowns, and he also had 4 interceptions on the defensive side of the ball. throwing him the ball is Cade Norquist, who was a first-team all-conference quarterback last year for the Royal Lions. And he returns after a season where he threw for 2,460 yards and 15 touchdowns with a 64% completion rating. So, that dynamic alone is something that you can really take a look and see what the Royal Lions are. I'm assuming that they're going to be very similar in offense to what Aquin is. Quick strike, hit them fast. At running back, this is where they have a little bit of lack of experience. They do return senior Noah Ross, who was a first-team all-conference linebacker, led the team in tackles with 105 tackles. And on the offensive side, he had 263 yards rushing on 39 attempts. And then one guy that we're not 100% sure on is Zach Joyner. He's coming into the season injured, so we don't know if he's going to play or not. But he was a first-team all-conference DB, second on the team in receptions. Well, first on the team in receptions, second on the team in receiving yards. 46 catches for 776 yards and 3 touchdowns. And he led the team in interceptions on the defensive side of the ball with 6. So those are some of the things that we're looking at with the Royal Lions. Obviously, some of their keys to success are going to be more of the skill players and their defensive core unit, where weaknesses are going to be more of depth, like we've seen a lot of 1A schools have. And then the offensive line is where they lack a little bit of experience, but they return some guys like Nolan Longley, Logan Huffman, Jacob Halstead, and Hunter Lapp. So it'll be interesting to see what they can bring to the field in a matchup, like we said, with one of the top teams in the state.
So you were at the Aquin Du-Pec game this weekend. Aquin, 1-0. How do they go 2-0? What do you see that is going to be their key to success?
Well, one of the biggest areas of concern for the Bulldogs is what we noticed back in the 2019 season is they get up big, but then they kind of lay off the hammer.
Oh, then they go on their cruise control like we've talked about.
Yeah. They got to stay on the hammer. You get that hammer down and you're revving it up. You got to keep on it. And granted, they played a high-profile team with Du-Pec that's coming around, and some of their issues were put on by themselves. They coughed up the ball quite a bit of times, and they got to be able to take care of that. And some of that was on quarterback, running back exchanges. Some of it was on bad snaps from the center to the quarterback, especially considering that Aquin runs a shotgun type offense. As long as Aquin can clean that up, which I expect them to do, especially considering that it was week 1, you tend to see a bigger upside going into week 2, especially in a season like this. As long as they can do that, I think that Aquin is going to be more than capable to keep things going. One of the biggest things, though, is that they need to be able to get more players involved. We saw Ty Steekel be a big problem for defenses in the Aquin offense last season, and he was relatively quiet against Du-Pec. Likewise with Andrew Bowman. He did get 1 touchdown catch, but he only had 2 receptions for 15 yards in the game. Really, it was the connection of Will Gustafson to Brennan Carlson that helped move the chains for the Bulldogs more times than not. And then, of course, Gustafson doing what we always see him do, and that's developing things on his feet on the run. Some of those are designed. Some of those are when he gets flushed out of the pocket. One of the things that we know is that he's one of those slippery kind of players. You have to get to him because he's fast and he's so elusive. But overall, defensive-wise, I thought Aquin did a good job. I mean, pass rush, they were getting into the backfield almost every play, it seemed like. Maybe they tried to send a couple blitzes here and there, but overall they did a really good job. They got a couple issues at cornerback that need to be answered. as far as pass coverage, which is probably going to be an issue with Rockford Christian. But as long as they take care of those small, minor things, I think Aquin is ready to go.
So, obviously, when we were picking our matchups, we didn't have Rockford Christian and we had ASC instead. I think regardless, I had Aquin packed, and I don't think that it's anything to stray away from now.
No, I agree. I still am going to take Aquin. I mean, you take a look at the Royal Lions and their playoff history. They've been to the playoffs 9 times since 2001. They've never won a playoff game. They've never come within 3 scores of a playoff opponent. You're playing a high-profile team here that's highly ranked in state. I think you're going to see some of the same things happen here like you would in a playoff game, first round. I think Aquin cruises.
Well, our next matchup, we don't know where it's at. At least it's TBD at this point, right? But we're pretty sure the Amboy Clippers will be facing the EPC Wildcats 7 o'clock on Friday night.
That's correct. Obviously, this game was originally scheduled for Freeport at the Pretzel Stadium, but we've heard word that it may be moved to the pasture in Pearl City, so we'll let you know, obviously, as we get more information around that.
From pretzels to pastures.
Yeah. But originally it was scheduled at Pretzel Stadium, so at this point in time, we're going to say it's at Pretzel Stadium. But you take a look, obviously, Amboy last week did not play, whereas EPC lost to Galena 28-6 in a game that was close at halftime, but then pretty much controlled and dominated by Galena in the second half.
So I know we only speculated that Amboy took the week off due to, a couple things like basketball and whatnot. Again, pure speculation on our part. But we just know that they weren't looking for an opponent week 1.
That's correct. I mean, you got a new coach in Scott Payne taking over for longtime coach Gary Jones. Pretty sure Amboy was one of the teams that opted to not interfere football and basketball as well, considering that Amboy usually has some success on the basketball courts. And they wanted to make sure that kids were given their full opportunity of play. But, here we are. Maybe they got an extra week of practice in even to get used to what Coach Payne wants to run. It'll be interesting to see the Clippers take the field.
So that leads right into my question. Hopefully they got an extra week of practice or at least got some extra sleep, which who wouldn't want an extra week of sleep? I would. Anyway, you watched EPC and Galena play.
Mm-hmm.
What will the Clippers have to do to beat the Wildcats this week?
Well, obviously EPC was pretty well handled on the offensive line last week against Galena, but don't kid yourselves. EPC is a very strong team. We've come to expect that over the past several years with EPC. And once again, it holds true. I mean, just looking at them, you could tell that they've spent a lot of time in the weight room. If I were Amboy, though, I want to make sure that my defensive line is, 1, ready for a fight, but 2, I want to be the aggressor. If I can be the aggressor, I can put pressure on quarterback Kellen Hensey, who is a first-year player for the Wildcats at the quarterback position. And I want to get him flushed out of the pocket. I want to make him make decisions that he's not used to making yet. Now, granted, I've talked to several people about Kellen Hensey, and, he's played football in the past in youth and junior high, and, he's obviously a stud basketball player for the Eastland Cougars. And everybody says that he's a very smart kid, very heady, and it doesn't surprise me considering that his family is part of the Finn family of the Stockton greats back in the late 70s and early 80s. So he's got that about him. He's an athlete. And just like Coach McNutt stated in his pregame presser, before the game. He just hopes that athleticism can translate. And really, for being in his first game, yeah, you could tell it was his first game, but he played very well at the same time. He had 30 yards rushing. He threw for just over 100 yards. He scored the only touchdown for the Wildcats. So in order to stop him, obviously you got to contain him because he is very fast and he's able to move. But if you can get pressure on that line and be that aggressor, now you're forcing somebody who may not necessarily be all there yet as far as being a football player, make decisions he's not used to making right away. And you got to kind of plan on that.
So to follow up on Henry, we were talking about how, you know, EPC does have the ability to be successful offensively. So what can Amboy do offensively to help combat the EPC defense?
Well, again, it's going to come down to line play. They're going to have to be ready to go up front. Obviously, we've seen Amboy here in recent years run more of a pistol spread type offense. And if they continue to run that offense under Coach Payne, they're going to need to be able to get some time to be able to throw the ball. What they can't really rely on is a lot of the bubble screens and quick bubble passes that we've seen in recent years, as they haven't really led to a lot of big plays outside of who was their big wide receiver last year? Marcus Wynn. Yeah, thank you. Obviously, he was a different style of athlete that allowed them to do those things. They don't have that in this season. So, you know, they're going to have to look to at least get some slants, go downfield. But in order to do that, you know, again, you got to have that offensive line be able to give you a 3-second, 4-second blocking scheme before you get beat. Obviously, with guys like Sean Fitzpatrick and Lane Bull, you got some guys there that can throw or catch the ball. You got Preston Hinkle that's going to be at quarterback again. So you got to be able to get these guys moving. We'll see what they can do, but they're going to have to be able to protect the gaps. One of the things that EPC did really good at defensively in that game was, one, they were able to get pressure, but two, you know, when the ball was in play, they were attacking the ball. They forced a couple fumbles in that game, especially Wyatt Baber had 2 back-to-back series where he made big plays that kept Galena out of the end zone in that game. And EPC's going to come hit you. They're not afraid to hit you, but you got to be able to be ready for that. And of course, it's football, and you got to expect that. I think Amboy just needs to be able to be tough up front, and I think once they get used to the physicality that EPC is going to bring, they'll be all right. I mean, it's not like they're not unfamiliar with these guys. They just played them a year ago, so it's just, you know, Amboy's another year older, so they got some experience that comes back where, you know, EPC is a very junior-dominated team, which is good to see on their behalf, but at the same time, Amboy should be able to rely on some of the experience that they gained last year compared to EPC, where they got a lot of newcomers.
Who are you picking to win this week?
Well, that's a good question, Kier. I think I'm going to stick with my guns, the EPC Wildcats.
Make it 2. Our second to last matchup is taking us down to Forreston, and it will feature the Milledgeville Missiles taking on the Forreston Cardinals Saturday night at 7 p.m.
Yeah, last week, obviously, we saw Milledgeville come away with the upset, 14-8. They got to ring that victory bell there at Floyd Daub Field again to celebrate that victory over Stockton. Obviously, Forreston did not play. They were scheduled to play Dakota originally, but had to cancel.
Some COVID concerns.
So this will be the first time we see the Cardinals take the field in the 2021 spring campaign. So, you know, it's going to be another one of those games. It'll be interesting to see. Can Milledgeville stay up to speed with what they did last week and play very aggressively defensively, especially going against a team that is power, power, power?
So, the Cards are back. What do they need to do to give them the leg up this week?
Well, Forreston's got to do what we've come to see Forreston do, and that's run their double wing offense effectively and efficiently. Take care of the ball, get off the ball as quickly as possible. Obviously, we've seen them on for the past several years, run that hurry-up offense, which kind of throws other teams off pace. How is that going to affect the Cardinals themselves, though, with the lack of practice time that they've had to be able to get conditioned? One of the good things is that you're coming out of basketball season, so you kind of have that conditioning under you. But football conditioning is different than basketball conditioning at the same time. I mean, it's one of the problems that we've seen in week 1 was the amount of cramping that was happening, especially considering, the temperatures aren't really that bad. I mean, usually you correlate cramping to high temperature, high heat, lack of fluids. Well, it's cooler, but it's just your muscles aren't ready for that because you're going from one sport to another. So how is it going to affect Forreston and their hurry-up offense? Overall, I think if you take care of the ball, like I said, you get off the line and you execute your run game. Forreston obviously has the guys in the backfield to take care of it with Shelton, Polish, and Neuschwander all back. So, we come to call Forreston the three-headed monster, and they have it again. And of course, we've come to see Forreston use at least a 6-back rotation, and they have the guys to do that again this season. It's just they're not guys that we're real acquainted with from years past.
Well, I know anything about Forreston, they will certainly acquaint us very quickly.
Yes.
So the Milledgeville Missiles, they stunned Stockton. What are they going to do to keep this ball rolling? Well,
they had big plays out of Ryan Kendall and Damon Miller and Ashton Nobis, and of course Nick Smith was at quarterback was one of the players that we had keyed on to have some big games. But, you take a look at the defensive line, and Logan Miners and Daniel Owens, both on the defensive and offensive lines, really stepped up in that game to create a lot of pressure for the Missiles against the Blackhawks. And they're going to have to do it again. I mean, you're going up against a team that's going to run the ball, and they're going to continue to run the ball. And when it's 4th and 2, they're going to run the ball. They're not going to punt. You got to be ready for that. Obviously, a couple of years ago, we watched Milledgeville as a heavy underdog almost upset Forreston in the playoffs. Granted, it seems like a long time ago, but it really wasn't that long ago. So these two teams do have some history, and the players that are going to take the field here this week were there for that game. And, granted, player-wise, size-wise, depth's going to go in Forreston's favor. So Milledgeville's going to have to take what they have, and they're gonna have to execute. They're gonna have to play clean. They're gonna have to play smart. But again, they're gonna have to play hard and heavy like they did against Stockton. If they can do that and not get wore out, they're gonna be all right.
You got?
I still like the Cards in this one.
I'm gonna agree with you there. You ready for the game of the week?
Yes, ma'am.
Alrighty. Well, our game of the week is going to take us to Pretzel Stadium once again, 10 a.m. on Saturday. It's going to feature the Orangeville Broncos taking on the Lena Winslow Panthers.
Yeah, last week we saw Orangeville come away with that 18-14 win over East Dubuque, where we saw Lena Winslow lose to Princeton 35-14 in a big time matchup down at Princeton as well. This is a great matchup. Obviously, we had both these teams pretty well hyped up to start the season. Lena Winslow obviously being ranked number 1 in Class 1A by the coaches, by our polls, by the computer polls. Everybody had Lena Winslow ranked number 1. Orangeville obviously had some looks at being ranked. Other polls had them ranked. So they're right there. Obviously, these two teams met up twice last season, with Lena Winslow winning 46-7 in the regular season, and then really putting the hammer down 52-8 in the playoffs.
I don't think this week is going to be quite like those.
No, I don't think so either. I think that this game's going to be a lot closer. Again, it's going to come down to execution, taking care of the ball, being opportunistic, and this is definitely going to be a little bit of a different Orangeville team that the current Panthers are going to see. I think when you take a look at what Orangeville is, we're looking at a Bronco offense that wants to run the ball. They got to be able to throw the ball as well. And they got to get aggressive on the offensive and defensive lines in order to match up with the Panthers. Again, this is another game where the Panthers are going to have a little bit more depth than what Orangeville has, but based off of what we've seen against Princeton, Lena Winslow, they subbed sparingly, which is not.
It's not unlike Lena Winslow when they're down.
Right.
I mean, I definitely wasn't surprised by the scenario that
correct.
played out. But you bring up a really good point about depth. Lena Winslow is facing some injuries this week that they're going to have to combat this week. And, I listened. You were at the Princeton-Lena Winslow game. I watched briefly as I listened to the East Dubuque Orangeville matchup. I know the Panthers cramped. They had some injuries. But obviously, like you said, they still have depth.
They do. They do have depth, but they don't have the size that we are accustomed to seeing out of Lena Winslow. Don't take that the wrong way. They're still a very strong team.
Well, we've seen plenty of Lena Winslow teams that are small in size,
right.
But they definitely didn't disappoint.
Unfortunately, like you said, they did face some injuries against Princeton, and with that, we probably saw Maury Roby's season come to an end, unfortunately, on his second carry of the game. Luckily, it wasn't too bad from what it appears, but it's enough to keep him out for the spring season anyhow, which is unfortunate. Of course, obviously a lot of people are asking about Jennings Dunker. Why isn't Dunker dressed? Why isn't Dunker dressed? Well, obviously a lot of people are able to visually see him on the sideline wearing a boot. We don't know when Jennings Dunker will return or if he will return. Those are some questions that are up in the air. Hopefully we do get the opportunity to see him play. He's vital to the Lena offense and defense, and you could definitely tell he was sorely missed on the defensive line against Princeton, especially going up against a running back with the talent of Rondé Worrells and the offensive line that Princeton had. I mean, they're a very formidable team. It's one of the things that I continue to be asked. And I said that I would answer it on this film. And Lena Winslow is still one of the top teams in Class 1A, no doubt about it. What Lena Winslow faced against Princeton was a high-level team that is a Class 3A team. You got to remember, 3A was severely down last season. But there are 3 teams that returned this year that are still very good compared to the rest of the 3A field. And that's Williamsville, Princeton, and Byron. And that didn't change. Obviously a lot of people would like to see that matchup of last year's Lena Winslow team versus Princeton, but this isn't last year. I think it was a great opportunity for Lena Winslow to take on Princeton. It gave their kids an opportunity to play a high-caliber opponent, and it gave them a building block to go into the fall season that they wouldn't have gotten in a regular season. There's no way in hell that with Lena Winslow's schedule that they would have been given that opportunity to play out of conference. But the season provided that. I think that despite the adversity that Lena Winslow faced in that game after Roby went out of the game and obviously not having Dunker, you saw some of the tide turn when Roby left that game. What Lena Winslow did at halftime and beyond speaks volumes to where their coaching staff has them. Granted, they had some other scoring opportunities that didn't come to fruition. They did make some calculated mistakes at the same time that cost them some points. But overall, they held themselves in check, and they did a great job of playing against that adversity and staying in the game both mentally and physically. And, you can't take nothing away. Yeah, they lost. But they played a really good game considering what they were up against without two of their biggest players.
Well, and obviously shortened season to boot.
Right.
So now on the opposite side, we have the Orangeville Broncos. We didn't really talk a whole lot about how Steve Snyder was also in his first year coaching. I know we talked a lot about Joe Edler, but Coach Snyder definitely had nothing, to turn his nose down. They had played a great game against the Warriors, and I was super impressed with what the Broncos have. I've got a whole page of notes of the game, and we had some great combinations that we saw where the players were placed, and we have some great players stepping and filling in some big shoes like Lobdell for Kleckner, and I just want to know, what can the Broncos do to combat the Panthers?
Well, it's going to start up front, and that's going to start with guys like Bowen and Stubby and Guy and Fulgate. Those guys are going to have to control the line on the defensive side, get pressure, obviously throwing Zach Baker into that formulation there, and get pressure on Lena Winslow. Obviously, the Panthers are going to look to do more of that run game out of their wing tee, and they'll go to that double wing at times. But they love to get that play action pass in. Obviously, what disrupts a good play action pass is a great pass rush. So, excuse me, that's where Orangeville needs to get the focus. They got to get that pressure up front. Likewise, at linebacker, with Guy and Kate Janicki, they're going to have to be there just as well to be able to either A, blitz, or B, drop in pass coverage. It's no hidden secret that Lena Winslow likes to roll one way while their backside goes out for the pass play down the seam. So you got to watch that seam route play. With that, you want to have, like you said, you want to have Lobdell and Rote be able to play responsibly in that defensive backfield to be able to read that. And that's exactly what you expect out of your DBs. Play pass first, run second. Whereas linebackers are opposite. Play run first, pass second. So we'll see how that translates. Offensively for the Broncos, keep feeding Janicki the ball all you can. Obviously, getting Chase Jordan involved too is going to be a big thing. And then you're going to have to be able to get some passes out of Jake Doyle to be able to get that Orangeville offense moving in different directions. Obviously, the Broncos, from what I hear, didn't have to pass the ball a whole lot against East Dubuque. They fed Janicki the ball quite a bit, which is what you expect when you have a horse like that in the backfield. But obviously, you can utilize Jordan's speed. We've watched Chase run the ball for the Broncos for the last 2 seasons, his 3rd season playing for the Broncos at the varsity level. And that dynamic in the backfield can do a lot of damage to a lot of teams. Against a team like Lena Winslow, you got to attack and get everything that you can. You may not get that big 10-yard run, but, you go back to the old days of Lano and Aaron in the early days, and there's, 3 yards in a cloud of dust. Well, what does 3 yards on 4 downs get you? It gets you a first down. So sometimes you got to just dig it out at the same time. As long as you're gaining those positive yards on every play, though, you're going to be successful. And that's what Orangeville has to do. They got to take it one play at a time, which is kind of cliche, but it's true. Take it one play at a time. Limit your mistakes. Take care of the football. No different than any other team. And obviously for Orangeville, depth is the concern. So you just gotta play smart, but you gotta play fast and you gotta play hungry, especially against against Panthers.
I'm gonna say I wouldn't be surprised if the Broncos could turn this into a track meet.
Right. I mean, you're playing on turf as well, so this is going to showcase who's got some speed, and we know that the Broncos have speed, and obviously the Panthers have speed. Unfortunately, they lost a little bit of it, but they're still going to be very formidable. I mean, one of the guys that really stood out with some speed was that of Evan England. Obviously, we came into the season not knowing who was going to be quarterback. Benson was a starter, and they put England at a slot back and running back position. So he's got some speed. We saw some carries out of Jensen Block back there as well. And really for the Panthers, what they got to do is be able to get those two guys going in what has come to be known as the Panther offense. And Setterstrom's going to have to be a force in this game as well for the Panthers to have success.
Who are you taking?
Oh, man. My original pick was Lena Winslow, and while I still feel that Lena Winslow is my pick, I think this game's going to be a lot closer, like I said earlier, than last year. And really at this moment in time, I think it could potentially be a toss-up type game. I mean, if there's any chance for Orangeville to beat Lena Winslow, it's right now. But I like the Panthers.
I agree. I could not have said any of that better myself.
Well, that gives you a look at what we see coming up in week 2. Obviously, we have a full slate of games this week, which is exciting. A lot of different times and different places for games to be played at again this week, but we're going to start to see schedules become more normal once we get into week 3 through 6. But, you know, it gives you a good opportunity to see different games. You know, one of the cool things about playing at Pretzel Stadium is the fact that you got Empire Street running right up at the top of the hill, and it's a great view right down into the bowl of Pretzel Stadium. So saw a lot of fans that kind of took attendance to their own outside of the gates watching from in, which was pretty cool to see. But, you know, a good slate of games. I think we're going to see a very competitive schedule here this week. Obviously, like we stated, a couple of teams taking the field for the first time this year, some unknowns, some that we are very well known with, and just trying to find out who's going to be what and where and how it's all going to translate. But overall, this is going to be another great week. Obviously, you see our north-south board right there, and you know, there's a lot of wins to be had, so to speak. But we're going to start to see the board fill out, and you know, as always, you see the cream rise to the top, and I don't think that's going to be any different. But I think we're going to see a lot more parity this season, a lot more close games, a lot more of that tight ball game. You know, kind of going back to the old upstate Illini when you could see a Warren River Ridge go 0-9 but take playoff teams to overtime and whatnot. You know, again, we've seen it out of East Dubuque the last couple of years. What can they do? I think your powerhouses aren't quite as strong as years past, and we're starting to see some of these teams rise up at the same time. So we're kind of in that ebb and flow, but it's going to be exciting.
I agree. I was just thinking about how fun it is just to have all the different games at all the different times. There's always something on the radio. It's exciting. And obviously with the weather changing, everyone's in a better mood.
Yeah, exactly. And you make a great point. It is a lot of excitement just to see and hear the sounds of football being played again. Your setup is awesome. I love it. I'm glad that you put it together. It's quite rocking for a Saturday afternoon, to be honest, especially with the way the schedule breaks out. But there's your games. Obviously, a lot of big ones. You know, we're not going to sit here and talk to you about tickets. We've already done that. You know how to get them, where to get them. We will continue to provide you links when we have those available as well. But tune in or get to the games if you can. As always, root for the NUIC.